Hi, folks. It's been a while since I've talked about shoes, so I thought today I would talk a little bit about shoes. So, I guess in no particular order, there are generally speaking three types of shoes. You have neutral shoes, meaning that the shoe isn't trying to do anything for your foot, it's just allowing your foot to be whatever it is. There are stability shoes, there are motion control shoes. For the most part, the vast majority of people, all you need is a neutral shoe. You don't need to have stability or motion control. You might. I mean, there are people that need those or they wouldn't make those, but the vast majority are fine with a neutral. A little side note, you can see I have orthotic down below. In the event that you wear an orthotic, then you should almost certainly be in a neutral shoe. The reason is that orthotic is trying to correct something with your foot that you don't want the shoe doing as well. So unless you've received advice from the person who made your orthotic that you should be in something else, orthotic would always be in a neutral. And again, I think the vast majority of us can be in a neutral shoe. Now, there's a couple of terms which are commonly not well understood as it relates to shoes, and those are stack height and heel drop. And they're really totally different things and not all that related. So stack height is simply how much you have between the bottom of your foot and the ground. So for example, if I can do this right, here's the ground. If my foot goes on or the shoe goes on there and it's flat to the ground, the stack height is 0. There's no difference. Everything is the same. If I put, say, this underneath and now that's the padding, now my stack height is going to be, say, maybe a half an inch or whatever it is. So stack height is just simply how much the manufacturer has between the bottom of your foot and the ground. And that stack height could be anywhere between, they usually measure it in millimeters. I use inches. You might be a quarter inch. You might be a half an inch. Some of the Hokas have a really high stack height, but that really has nothing to do with heel drop. Stack height is a totally different thing. It's just how much pad is there between your foot and the ground. Now, heel drop is different. Heel drop is going to be the offset between your forefoot and your heel to the ground. So again, if I can get my hands right, if you had nothing on, if you're barefoot, your heel drop is 0, meaning when you put your foot down, your forefoot, your heel, everything will touch the ground at the exact same time. But the way running shoes are made is they have a slight difference between the forefoot and the heel, going up everywhere between a 0 drop shoe, where there's absolutely no difference, to I've seen shoes as high as maybe a 14 millimeter heel drop, meaning that your heel is going to be 14 millimeters above the ground when your foot is on the ground from your forefoot. It's kind of like an ankle. Or think of high heels. High heels have a 2-inch heel drop or something, if you will. So stack height, heel drop are very, very different things. Now, let's get into, some shoes for you. You might want to try the barefoot test first. So here's what the barefoot test is. Grab your running shoes and then take your shoes off altogether. Stand on one leg, stand on the other leg, kind of see how your balance is standing in bare feet. Now try and do that same thing with your running shoes on. Chances are you will find that standing and balancing in bare feet is easier than with your running shoes. Not because there's anything wrong with the shoes, it's because of what's called proprioception. It's your ability to sense the ground, to feel. And when you don't have anything between your foot and the ground, your body senses that better and you can maintain better balance. Why is this important? Because running is all about single leg balance over and over and over again. You're virtually never on 2 feet at the same time, except at the start line. After that, you're always on 1 foot, so you have to maintain that balance. And what that means is the more shoe that you have between you and the ground, the harder it is for your body to kind of sense what's going on and maintain that balance. So as such, I'm a fan of wearing as little shoe as possible. I don't like to have a lot of stack height. I like to have a lighter shoe. I like to be able to feel the ground more because it helps me get my balance and that proprioception better than if I have a lot of foam in between myself and the ground. I also like to have a low heel drop. What is a low heel drop? Low heel drop is anywhere between 0 and maybe say 8 millimeters at the most. I personally run in about a 4 millimeter. I tried to make the jump to 0. It just never felt good to me, so I kind of stick at a 4 millimeter drop. But I don't like to have a higher millimeter drop. And by the way, I'm not talking about like the Nike Next Percent and whatnot. They tend to be more like 8 to 10. That's a little bit higher. But in your everyday training shoe, I like that lower heel drop in as little shoe as possible. Why do I like the lower heel drop? 80% of recreational runners tend to overstride. If you want to do another barefoot test, take your running shoes off. Hopefully it's warm weather when you're going to do this, and go out and find a nice grassy field and run. And chances are you're going to have a nice short stride in front. Your foot is going to land more on the midfoot because your body's saying, hey, I don't want to land on my heel. I got no protection that's going on in there. Studies have shown that when you tend to have a higher heel drop, not only will that shoe come in contact with the ground just that little bit more quickly, but you're more likely to overstride because your body goes, oh, I got this big cushion in here, I won't feel that jarring. As the heel drops, so to speak, as you get less and less of that, you have more and more of a tendency to run with a little bit shorter stride in front, which is good because that protection isn't there. Now, if you're currently running in a running shoe that's a 12 millimeter heel drop, which is pretty common in a lot of training shoes, you don't want to make the adjustment to go down to 6 or 4 right away. You need to have a lot of strength, flexibility, and mobility in your Achilles in order to do that, because your body has been accustomed to running in that high heel, if you will. So typically you make that adjustment over time unless you know that you have a lot of strength, flexibility, and mobility. So if you're used to running in at 12, you might go down to 10 for your next pair of shoes. And then the next pair of shoes, maybe you go to 8 or wherever you want to go. But a lot of people will get injured if they try and go from 12 to something lower all the time. But I do like a low heel drop. All right, so I also like to have 2 pairs in rotation. I run in a Saucony Kinvara as one of my trainers, and I run in a Newton, either a Fate or a Gravity. I kind of switch between the two. So I have 2 shoes. So on Tuesday, I'll use one shoe. Wednesday, I use another shoe. You know, why do I do that? Well, I get still twice as long a life out of the shoes. I'm not using as much because each one fits my foot just a little bit differently. And so it's nice to have some variety in that. So I'm a big fan of having a couple pair of shoes and doing those in rotation. The final thing is, so when should I replace my shoe? I do mine based upon how many miles I have on them. And I have learned over time that for me, in a pair of really light shoes like I might use on the track, I'll get about 250 miles. For a trainer, I'll get more like 350 to 400. If I start to feel it in the knees, which is where I'm going to feel it, then I might retire those a little bit earlier. I know people that only get a couple hundred miles out of shoes. I know people that get 500-600 miles out of shoes. So much depends upon the surface you run on, your weight, your gait. There's a lot of factors in that. But I'll tell you what you can't do. You can't just look at the shoe and say, well, I can tell by looking at the shoe, I'm ready to retire this. So here's my current track shoe. This has right now about maybe 20 miles on it. It's fairly new. Here's my last track shoe. These had about 240 miles when I retired them. And you look at the bottom. Now, if you look at the bottom of these, they don't look that bad. In fact, if you look compared to the new shoe, there's not a ton of difference. So it looks like, well, this shoe is perfectly good. I can continue running in this. But the fact is, I know this shoe is out of its useful life. How do I know that? What really wears out in your shoe is going to be this foam in here that wears out, and you can't see that. But there's a test you can do to see that. So I'll tell you why these are shot, because I can take and I can just about twist these around because all the support in here is gone. These shoes might not look like it, but they have found their natural life. If I look at my new shoe, I can twist it because it's a lightweight shoe, but I can't twist it into a knot like I can in the other shoe because all of this in here is still stiff like it should be. So when it's time to change your shoes, go try the twist test. Don't go by what they look like. So that's all I can think of for now, but I'm sure there's more stuff. But if you got questions on my opinion on shoes, just ask down below.